Hello, welcome to MJRRPG. The following is all I've learned about creating something for the Miskatonic Repository, Call of Cthulhu's community content program on DriveThruRPG, using a dissection of how I made and sold my first scenario, Branches of Bone, and a breakdown on the costs and sales. What this is not is an explanation of how I wrote it, or a general guide on scenario writing, for two reasons. One, I don't really know how to write, and two, there are many adventure writing guides out there, and I wrote the scenario following one of those, sort of. Branches of Bone recently gained the Platinum badge on DriveThruRPG, meaning 1001 plus sales, joining, I think, as of April 2025, 7 other Miskatonic Repository titles. Being released in August 2022, it took about 2.5 years to reach this point. I'm going to lay out what factors I think most helped it do relatively well as highlight difficulties and mistakes, explore some sales data, and give a basic rundown on how the Miskatonic Repository program worked along the way. Hopefully others interested in creating for the program will get some useful ideas out of it. Branches of Bone recently gained the Platinum badge on DriveThruRPG, meaning 1001 plus sales, joining, I think, as of April 2025, 7 other Miskatonic Repository titles. Being released in August 2022, it took about 2.5 years to reach this point. I'm going to lay out what factors I think most helped it do relatively well as highlight difficulties and mistakes, explore some sales data, and give a basic rundown on how the Miskatonic Repository program worked along the way. Hopefully others interested in creating for the program will get some useful ideas out of it. Thanks in advance to Nick Brook, one of Chaosium's community ambassadors who provided the extra publisher sales information. Part 1. Paying for the thing. To start, here is a full breakdown on the costs that went into the scenario. There are also some additional costs that were adjacent to the scenario that I'll talk about separately. Direct costs. 1. The Write Your Own Adventure program. $29.25 US. Number 2. Art. $500 Canadian. 3. Voiceover for video trailer. $15.30 Canadian. 4. Advertising. $50 Canadian. Additional costs, number 5, Affinity Publisher, $74.99 Canadian, and 6, website and podcast, variable cost. Number 1, the Write Your First Adventure program by the Storytelling Collective is exactly what the title implies. It's a little tutorial on writing an adventure. It had a few different tracks, with one of those being specific to Call of Cthulhu. Some of the lessons were quite useful, others less so. As Branches of Bone was indeed my first adventure written for the purpose of making public, the program did its job. But its main use for me was the time limit, I think it was 1 month, having a cadre of other first-time writers to talk with, and a bundle of all the completed works. The program has since moved away from the time limit and doesn't have a bundle, so I don't think it would work well for me anymore, which is unfortunate, as the time pressure and the bundle are the two most important factors in Branches doing well. The bundle seems to have accounted for over 200 sales since release, almost enough on its own to get the print-on-demand option. More on bundles and discounts later. Number 2. Covers sell books. They just do, especially for RPGs sold online. DriveThruRPG has an awkward interface and is awash with titles, so you have a fraction of a second to grab someone's attention with the cover and a title, and a tiny little thumbnail to cover at that. While you can certainly create your own cover and artwork, and for those artist writers out there, good on you. You are very talented and you're great. But for artless hacks like myself, we need to pay a professional. Linus Larson is responsible for Branches' cover and is almost certainly to thank for the vast majority of its sales. It's just an absolute banger. He also did 3 insert pieces, 1 being there from the start and 2 added in later before it qualified for print on demand. They are all kick-ass, and while art doesn't make a scenario, they certainly make it more interesting to look at and are helpful advertising tools, as advertising is mostly visual online, and it's easier to show a kick-ass picture to hook attention than a text-only elevator pitch. I also need to point out that when I first published Branches, I included one garbage AI image to break up the massive walls of text. It looks like shite, and Linus's real art replaced it before print copies were available. If you look at the text version of this, you can see the 2 pictures, and as you can tell, there's no comparison. I'm glad Chaosium made a clear rule stopping the use of AI-generated slop in Miskatonic Repository titles. On the other hand, a fancy cover generally has no bearing on the actual quality of the scenario. The best written RPG material needs no fancy pictures to play well. There are plenty, too many, RPG products that are beautiful but feel like they could have been written on the back of a napkin with a couple minutes of playtesting. More time spent on testing and more money on editing will affect a scenario's quality infinitely more than artwork. More on editing later. But editors don't grab eyeballs unless they're really hot and you put them on the cover. In summary, art doesn't make a scenario, and the actual scenario can and must stand on its own, but art definitely still sells the title. And confession, I didn't have an editor for Branches. I'll address that more later, but, take it for what you will. Point 3, the voiceover. I made a little trailer for Branches of Bone, with the only paid part of it being a voiceover by Hazmat FTW. A trailer for a community content Call of Cthulhu scenario is extremely silly, but I had fun making it, and I do think it had some impact on attracting attention, as it technically has more views than anything about Branches on my blog or podcast. Probably not enough to make the time spent fiddling with it efficiently spent, but again, I like video editing and hadn't tried it since high school, so that's not lost time for me. Number 4, advertising was a dumb idea and a waste of money. A friend suggested a social media Google ad campaign, so I threw some money at it, and it did nothing but make me feel stupid. The Miskatonic Repository is a minuscule niche community content of a tiny niche, Call of Cthulhu, of an already small niche, TTRPGs. There's no use paying the almighty algorithm to advertise to such a small pool of interested people when there are other ways of reaching out to them directly. More on the awfulness that is marketing later. Number 5. While it is possible to make a PDF essentially for free with Word and images with Paint, if you're wanting to make it look nice, you'll need some sort of layout publishing software like InDesign or Affinity Publisher, and some sort of graphics editor. Adobe Suite is absurdly expensive for a non-student or professional that needs to use it somewhere else, so I turned to Affinity Publisher and an ancient copy of Photoshop I refuse to let go of. I've used Affinity for everything since Branches, so I can't really pin the cost on it. It's a nice enough little program, if fiddly, and now superseded by its second edition, which I haven't bought yet. Combined with art, a nice layout is one of the more obvious ways to draw attention. If someone looks at the DriveThruRPG preview and sees a nasty-looking PDF, they might not want to read long enough to realize the actual quality of the scenario. More on layout and production later. And point 6. In addition to the above cost that went into the scenario itself, I also have this blog podcast thingy. I started it to write reviews, but I also, of course, use it to spread work of the junk I make too. Side note, it is a little weird when a creator also reviews things in the same category they make, like novelists reviewing novels or filmmakers reviewing films. It's all a big gauche, but hopefully this niche of a niche of a niche we find ourselves in here can absolve me and avoid a ethics in TTRPG journalism mob from lynching me. Whatever platform you are reading or listening to this on does cost some cash to keep up, but it generally pays for itself. The last cost that went into selling Branches is, of course, time. I did not exactly log how many hours went into creating and then marketing it, but it would be a unfortunately big number. Luckily, it was fun, and this is a hobby, so I'm not overly concerned about how efficient I was with those hours. The marketing was less fun, for the most part, but I'll talk about that later. One more very obvious missing cost is editing. I didn't pay an editor for Branches, or honestly, any of my work so far, mostly for the simple reason that good editors are really expensive. This is despite editors being by far the most effective use of money to improve an adventure. If we need to weigh the cost of a good cover or a good editor regarding the actual quality of the scenario, the editor will win every single time. The big but is that editing is only obvious when it's done badly. Good editing is invisible. A kick-ass cover and evocative inserts, everyone will notice those. Really good editing, you just read the thing and it reads well. If you have the cash, get an editor. But if you have a limited budget, you have to make a choice. I'm basic, so I went with the shiny thing. And a other side note, if you can get someone to look at your thing for free, or you trade, editing, you edit someone's thing, they edit yours, that's obviously the best use. But I also am bad at talking to people, so I've never done that. Part 2, making the thing. I'm not actually going to get into the creation of Branches, as there are plenty more useful and better written guides on making adventures out there. I don't have any idea what I'm doing and have very little real experience, and the creation process is so extremely varied and tailored to the individual. I could go into how and why I did what I did with Branches, but that feels even more masturbatory than this piece already is, and without the pretense of giving raw numbers from which others can hopefully glean some useful information. Part 3, selling the thing. And now, sales. If you're looking at the text version of this, there is a little graph which has the sales for Branches broken down by quarters. Between August 2022 and April 2025, Branches sold 1,001 copies. Though in addition to those numbers are 20-ish books sold through Chaosium's Miskatonic Repository / Jonestown Compendium pop-up booths at conventions. More on that later. With customers spending $3,928 US and 35 cents, and myself receiving $1,964.18 US in royalties, 50%. DriveThru and Chaosium split the other half, with the royalties either staying in DriveThruRPG as credit or being transferred to PayPal. While DriveThruRPG charges a whopping $1 US to withdraw royalties to PayPal, additional fees to get that money to your bank will obviously depend on where you live and in the correct currency. Then there's taxes. Not going to get into taxes. I'll now go over the biggest points that I think went towards Branches selling pretty well, or what I intentionally focused on, in no particular order. 1. Niche. 2. Presentation. 3. Discounts, bundles, and sales. 4. Self-promotion. 5. Outside promotion. 6. Community. Point 1. Branches filled a niche, mostly in terms of setting, but also scenario structure. Cthulhu Dark Ages is extremely sparse official content-wise, and also only has 24, maybe less, or so titles on the Miskatonic Repository, and very few of those, if any, are focused on Vikings, despite how large they loom over the pop culture perception of the Dark Ages. Branches is also a fairly short one-shot scenario with a pulpy survival horror structure. The niche setting attracted anyone looking for Dark Ages, and the structure gave it a low barrier to entry, making an easy convention scenario or in-between campaign session, as well as attractive to players from more action-oriented RPGs dipping their toes into Call of Cthulhu. Looking at other popular Miskatonic Repository scenarios, I think it's clear that most of them are fairly deep into a particular niche, letting gravity naturally draw on their attention. For more information, you can see Prospera House's write-up of the other Platinum and Gold bestsellers, link in the show notes. Part 2. Looking at the highest-selling Miskatonic Repository titles, a focus on presentation is fairly common. As said earlier about art, the visual quality of a title really doesn't affect the actual meat of the work, and a well-written plain text scenario trounces the most beautiful art book of an underwritten adventure. But as a customer poking around an online storefront, fancy art and layout doesn't only draw the eye, it also imparts a bit of confidence, which may be more important to get them over the buy it hurdle. If the creator has clearly taken the time to make their work look professional, and not just the cover art but the interior layout and formatting along with the store page itself, then the potential confidant can have some degree of confidence the creator themselves has confidence in their work. On DriveThru, you have 3 ways to grab a potential customer's interest and inspire a bit of confidence. 1. Cover art. 2. Production description. 3. PDF preview. For Branches, once again, Linus Larsson's cover art goes way too hard for what I wrote and likely sold the scenario by itself. Additional artwork by Larsson, as well as some handouts by yours truly, meant I could pretty up the product description, and I also took care to list as much detail about what was actually included in the scenario, and through that trailer I talked about earlier for good measure. Lastly, while I am by no means skilled at layout, I did try to make the PDF visually interesting, even if it falls into the tropey sepia tone old book look of most modern Cthulhu stuff, and have a descriptive table of contents and introduction so the first few preview pages of the PDF can grab attention and give the potential customer full overview of what they would be getting. Part 3. The majority of sales are through discounts, namely bundles and sales, whether site-wide or seller-directed campaigns. With Branches, only 27% about of sales were at full price, while the rest were discounted in some way. The site-wide sales are the biggest drivers overall, but the seller-directed campaigns can be combined with self-promotion to good effect. Or poor effect, bit of crapshoot that. Bundles are a force multiplier, combining the discounts with extra promotion. If the bundle contains only your own work, it still puts more of your stuff in front of the buyer, who might have been originally only interested in one thing. If it's a bundle combining titles from multiple authors, then you both get to reach out to customers who might not have been originally interested in your work, as well as bonus promotion as each author likely reaches out to their own network to show off the bundle. For Branches, the Write Your First Adventure bundle was a massive boost in the beginning, helping it into the silver seller category, 101 plus sales, within a month, and eventually selling about 200 copies. As mentioned earlier when talking about the changes to the Write Your First Adventure program, the loss of the bundle is quite sad, as they were a huge boon for new writers to get their work out there. Point 4. Self-promotion, or the dreaded marketing of a scenario, is by far the worst part of the whole endeavor. Go on any social media site or Discord server and see the nightmare of desperate creators trying to get some attention, any attention, please God give us attention, for their work. It does work to some extent though, and without any of it, a title can fall through the cracks of the internet's fickle attention. For the first few weeks of Branch's release, I went hard on promotion, and it sucked. After 2 months, I largely stopped, except for sales or milestones, and even then it's still embarrassing to make posts asking for people to buy your crap. I have little advice on how not to suck at this, or how to make it not feel bad. I can of course say that having this blog made self-promotion easier, but it still meant clogging it up with blabbing about my own stuff rather than reviews and other fun things. Yes, I see the irony of what I just wrote. The only exception to self-promotion not being a horrible time is when it's through your community, but I'll talk more about that later. Point 5. Outside promotion is tricky and often out of your control. There aren't that many people out there regularly reviewing Miskatonic Repository content, and the handful that do exist are swamped by review requests. Customers likewise barely ever give feedback. After 3 years, Branches has a whopping 9 reviews on DriveThruRPG and 2 reviews outside of the DriveThru, that being Taskerland and reviews from Riley, for a cool 1% feedback rate. That's not entirely true, I'll talk about that in the next point. Reviews are a bajillion times more useful than self-promotion, so each and every one of those reviews is worth their weight in gold, or text count in gold. There isn't a good way to encourage reviews, so all I can say is to whoever might be reading this now, go write a review for something you enjoyed or hated recently. Whoever made it will appreciate it, even if it is negative. Those are more useful anyways. Another source of outside promotion unique to RPGs are actual plays. These are also difficult to get hold of unless you happen to have your own actual play podcast or channel. I was beyond lucky and managed to have the Miskatonic Playhouse run Branches, with Chaosium's own Lynn Hardy and one of Jackson Elias's good friends, Scott Dord, among the players. Chaosium itself does some promotion, though sporadic. They used to release frequent posts about new Miskatonic Repository releases, but these are becoming increasingly rare. More impactful and cool are the pop-up booths put on during various conventions Chaosium staff members attend. These are frequently run by the community content ambassadors and overall cool people, Nick Brook and Bridget Jeffries, where they sell printed MR books. Creators get sent regular royalties afterwards, and buyers save shipping and import costs and lead times, which can be pretty rough if you don't live in a country with a printer. Cough, Canada, cough. One last and most obvious, but most out of control, source of outside promotion is simply people running it for their friends or at conventions. The more a scenario is run, played, and enjoyed, the more people want to run it and buy it themselves. It's taken a while, but I've occasionally seen Branches popping out at conventions without any connection to myself, or even notification. And that's probably the happiest I've been regarding anything to do with Branches. People have played it. That's cool. It's hard to tell if anyone's actually ever using it, or if you just shout it out into the void. It's gone forever. Point 6. Community, and I mean actual people you enjoy spending time with and enjoying a shared hobby, is the most joyful way to market a scenario, because it's not marketing. It's just having fun and sharing with people that are genuinely interested in what their compatriots are making. I have my home group that I've played RPGs with since high school, but like many others since the Great Disruption, a large part of my RPG time is spent online playing with strangers, or rather people who start out as strangers, and also, or rather, when I had time to spend online playing games. Some of you might notice I haven't written anything in a very long while. That's because I don't play anything anymore, because I have a child. Through a convoluted and incestuous mix of gaming and podcast Discord servers, I've gone to know a little village of gamers and creators. I can throw up a post on one server for a short notice game, and people I've never met before, along with others I've gamed multiple times with across several other servers, all hop in. Getting to know people across the world of all manner of identities and personalities has truly been the most meaningful and enjoyable experience I've had with what I'm increasingly thinking was probably a misstep in technological advancement, the internet. And when you make something and share it with this little community, people naturally take interest in what their compatriots are making. While Branches has only 11 reviews out there, I've heard far more direct feedback, being questions about running the scenario, messages summing up how a session went, or talking with players after running it for a playtest or after convention. And when you know the creator of something you enjoy, you obviously want to talk about and share it. Take a look at any of the reviews of Miskatonic Repository scenarios I have on this blog for evidence of that. I started this thing to write reviews and replays, one of those again, of the Seas of Terror series, and from there I started wanting to make my own scenarios. If anyone asked me about marketing a scenario, then I'd first tell them to stop thinking about it like a greasy used car salesman and instead just go run for people. You should have done that during the playtest first, right? Especially people you don't know yet. If you're not having fun with it, and players aren't having fun with it, then you're going to have a deeper problem. I hope part of this, any of this, some of this, can give an idea or two of what to or not to do when putting work out on the Miskatonic Repository. Or at least you found something of interest. While this was only about paying for and selling the one scenario, I might someday try and write something about actually, writing it. Not as advice or a guide, not only because there are many better tutorials out there, but because I don't know how to write good scenarios. Thank you for listening. As always, credit to Cryochamber for use of their album, Cthulhu. Until next time, have a good one.